So we're back down the shed once again, 28 days left. I've got a few parts to play with now. The plenum chamber's all blasted and looking about where I wanted it to be. I've got the fuel rail machined and drilled, so I'm able to have a crack at fitting that on. Yeah, so that's what we're going to start off with this week. So let's see how far we can get. So I've had the fuel rail drilled at the base and tapped to take the banjo fittings in the bottom there. Another little trick was it had this center groove here which we had to machine off because that would have obviously let the fuel leak out past the alloy washers. Well, I'll put the banjo bolts on and stick my injectors in and see what it all looks like. Before I put it on, I'll show you these. These are the injector rail mounts. They just go on the base here, and when you're good to go, you cross drill them and put the bolt through. Those injector rail clamps, here's how they work. You pick up a point like this near your injector, you bolt that guy down through the center, and then you cross drill it through the rail like we said. You do have to make your own spaces but to get them to the right height, so looks like it should work really good. By mounting the fuel rail inlet and outlets underneath has really fixed all the dramas that I was going to have. Also the clearance to the banjo bolt fitting to the throttle body adjuster screw there is fine, so we've got heaps of room. So that's basically how they're going to fit. You bolt them down at the correct spacing so you don't crush your injector to death, and on goes the rail. It's really good how they scribe the lines or machine the lines in the extrusion so you can get the dead center of where you're meant to drill it. Makes it a lot easier. Last time the bike was running, the fuel pressure regulator was mounted here somewhere, right up the back, and it always slightly hung out of the bottom of the panel. What I'm thinking of doing is trying to mount the fuel pressure regulator up the front here to keep it a shorter run to the fuel rail. Not quite sure if it's all going to work yet, but I've also bought this panel here that's off the standard panel off the bike, which mine never had, which might bolt down as a bit of a, deflection of the heat, I suppose, because you wouldn't want that straight onto your fuel pressure regulator. That's a path I'm going to have a crack at going down, so we'll see how it goes. I've made a bit of a cardboard template to try not to wreck that plastic heat shield that I've got. So I'm going to transfer that over to this guy here and cross my fingers that it all works. I cut all that panel out, and after a few goes I think I got it pretty good. So it will basically go in there like that and protect that regulator from the heat of the exhaust system. Trying to make a good plan with that regulator mount. I've dug through all my scrap bits and pieces of alloy, and this looks like about the best bit to start with. I think I'm going to try and pick up off these two bolts on the rocker cover and modify this bit of alloy to mount that regulator. Alright. Even though I'm not sure what all these lines mean, but let's chop it out and see where we end up. Well, I've chopped into it, roughed it out, and I'll smooth it all off and see if it's even usable at the end of it all. Now I've cut it out, it's probably easy to show you what I was thinking. I'm going to pick up off these two bolts here, mount it like that, and then get the regulator and bolt him in here like this on the flat bit. So we'll drill them out, mount it up, and see if it's going to work. So the days are ripping by, 26 days left. What have we got done? The fuel rail's been done and cross drilled. So, and it's all nice and clean. He can go on. The regulator mount's been done. So I should be able to drill and tap the rocker cover and look at mounting that up today. I'll start with those two things and look at plumbing the fuel system. There's a couple of holes in the rocker cover after they've been tapped to M6. It was magnesium. I was a bit concerned what that would be like because I can't remember ever tapping it before, but it was a piece of cake. It even felt a bit like nylon, like it was really good. Okay, let's bolt this bracket on. Here's where we ended up. I made the bracket for the fuel pressure regulator. It sits on a couple of posts to give it a bit of an air gap to keep it away from the heat of the engine. When the fuel rail's on, the fuel will return from the rail into this port here, and then from this port here, it goes back to the fuel tank. I've got a bit of clearance to the feed pipe for the turbo, so I can still adjust the fuel pressure. And this is that boost sensing line that goes to, boost or vacuum, so he's got lots of clearance as well. I've got the plenum chamber back on. It's good seeing that sitting back on there. Just going to nut out where all the lines are going to go, the best way for the best flow and neatness. Probably got to look at sticking the fuel pump under the back of the plenum chamber soon so I can see where those hoses are going to go. It was pretty hard getting these rubbers in like always, but they're all good. I might need to change these boys here. They look a bit sort of worn out and the heat's affected them, so we'll rough it all out, probably have to pull it off again and fit those intake manifold rubbers. Yeah, that's probably it for tonight, so back into it tomorrow. Okay, so 25 days left. Doesn't feel like I'm making a lot of progress, but I suppose I must be. I'll have a go at mounting the fuel pump now and try and get that side sorted out. It's got to mount underneath the plenum chamber there, so that's what we'll do now, is try and remember how that was mounted and then try and plumb him up. I bought this fuel pump quite a while ago. Hopefully it's the correct one. Soon see, I suppose. That's what it looks like. Here's the specs on it in case you were wondering what it does, and I can also look back at a later date when I forget what the specs are. I just dug out the old one. Looks very similar, so I hope these clamps go around it and we'll be halfway there. I think I've made a plan how to mount the fuel pump. Speaking to me mate Glenn, he came up with a great idea to use some riv nuts, so we're going to use that system to mount this guy. Better than the old tech screws and bits and pieces I ran many years ago. Anyway, next thing I've got to try and fit in the equation is the fuel filter. So I can't quite stick it down the bottom there. It doesn't seem to fit really good, so I might put it up here and basically mount it to one of these original bolts. At least I can be sure it's not going to chafe itself and wear a hole in it and pour petrol everywhere. I might also need to wrap it in some of that heat reflective tape. I've got this old box of tricks from the Harley shop that used to be next door to us, and found a couple of brackets. There's all sorts of stuff buried in here, so that's what I come up with. I'm going to see if I can make that work, because on a bit of a deadline now. 25 days left. I've got a mounting bracket there. Obviously that's just going to chop straight through the filter, so I found this in the shed. I'm going to see if I can insert the filter into it to give it some sort of protection. So we'll see what happens there, but that's my plan of attack, to try and push that into there and somehow mount it up on here like that. That's as far as I can push it in. I'll cut it just where it starts to get smaller in the diameter, so then at least I know that the filter can't work its way out of the rubber, and if I put a cable tie or a clamp on this end, it'll lock it in there. My filter holding bracket worked out pretty cool. I ended up using that fella there, or one like him, and you've seen the blue stuff. I found another bit of steel and I was able to make a bit of a spring clamp to hold my filter, so now it can actually roll into here. If I can get in there, it actually locks in there and holds it quite good. Also, it's isolated from wearing a hole in itself. The way it's going to work, fuel will come from the pump, run up here through the high pressure filter into the fuel rail, through the fuel rail, out of the fuel rail into the regulator, and then that's where it will return the fuel to the fuel tank. I've got the rear caliper mount, which I'm going to blast with the garnet and then the glass beads, and I've also got the rear exhaust bracket that hangs the muffler and whatnot, so I'm going to give that a bit of a blast with the garnet and then paint it, bake it in our oven. I've just finished work back down the shed for another night. Here's the bracket that I painted up. Come out really good. I use that heat-proof paint like I've done the exhaust pipes in, and here's the rear caliper mount with the bead blasting, which come out nice too. I bought a regulator, dulled the pressure off to 40 psi, and it actually come out a lot more uniform than even the plenum chamber did. Alrighty, let's have a play. I've had a bit of a look at the fuel system. Mounting the fuel pump is going to be determined by where this fitting is that enters the fuel pump. I'll pull the plenum chamber out now and look at mounting that fella down onto the frame rail. I couldn't help myself, I had to check one last time. Basically, with the fuel pump sitting on the frame rail, the plenum chamber sitting on it, and the tank sitting on, I've just got a little bit of a window of clearance. So once again, it's all going to barely fit, but a miss is a miss. That's about the best location for it. Time to drill some holes.